Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we are back covering Black Mirror's USS Callister into Infinity, and this time we welcome supervising sound editor Tom Jenkins. Tom will talk us through the sonic process of expanding and creating new worlds in the first Black Mirror sequel episode. Please be warned, there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Tom. Hi, Tom. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Bobby. Thanks for having me.
We're here to sit down and talk about Black Mirror, the specifically talking about the USS Callister into Infinity. Yeah, you're my fourth guest on from that episode, so I'm excited to sort of basically go back on an adventure.
Yeah, you've spoken to a lot of the post team and some of the on-set team as well.
Yeah.
Look, it's a really fun episode. And it's nice that you've had a chance to chat to a lot of us and hear sort of different facets of how it all came together.
Yes, and it's one of those because it's the first sequel in the Black Mirror universe, even though they have done, even though there's Easter eggs peppered in throughout the series. But doing a sequel to an episode that's pretty not unheard of because people always do it, but for like Black Mirror it is, and it's exciting to see where the story can go and how and where the story went because I can imagine sometimes like with the episode being so popular, it's like going back to an old lover. Is it going to be the same like how it was before? But then I think potentially it's been topped.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we'd all be lying if we said there wasn't a degree of trepidation from everyone. Because as you said, the first one was such a good episode and such a popular one. But yeah, look, as soon as we got the script, we read it and we realized, I mean, there's no surprise. Charlie and his writing partner smashed out the park, and it was it immediately jumped off the page as something that was an interesting evolution from that episode. And it's in some ways more lighthearted and it is funnier. And it's just, yeah, it feels like an evolution. It feels slightly different. I think that was a great way to go with it. And it's always funny when you work on things because you work in such a we work on things to be broadcasted to as many people as possible, but you work in such a tight knit group that it for the entire time you're working on it, you fall in love with this episode, you fall in love with these characters, and it's always really nerve wracking to watch them get released into the world and to see how people react to it. And that was tenfold on something like this, but it's been brilliant to see how positive people's reactions have been.
And because you're in air quotes kind of like a new kid on the block, especially when you have certain crew members coming back and you've come on as sort of a newbie, should we say? Because I don't think you've worked on the previous episode.
No, this
From my
season,
research, just in case I haven't put my foot in it or something.
no, you're correct. This season was the first time I've worked on any Black Mirror.
So when you're sort of a new person joining the team, how do you go about integrating yourself into the group, but then also not losing your style as well?
I mean, I was fortunate on this that so my sort of my introduction to Black Mirror or to working on this season came from James Ridgway. There's a brilliant mixer who works at the Farm Post in Soho, and we did a show called Baby Reindeer together, which did quite well, and people responded really well to it. And it was sort of fortunate for me that the sound supervisor from the last season of Black Mirror had a scheduling conflict on this one and couldn't make it. So James phoned me and asked if I'd like to come on board, and obviously I jumped at the opportunity. I think everyone working in sound at some point has binge watched a lot of Black Mirror episodes because sound is always at the crux of what tells those stories. And it was, yeah, it's just exciting to be a part of it. And I think with regards to my style, as supervising sound editors and sound designers and people that work in sound post, our style is to get to know the director and the showrunner, and we service the story and we service their vision. And I think if I don't think we're doing our jobs properly if we're trying to impose a specific style onto the show. But having said that, I think what everyone does bring are different sensibilities of interpreting stories and reading stories and sort of bringing sort of a new emotional storytelling to something. And I think whenever you have a new crew member, they're bringing life experiences, they're bringing previous relationships to it, they're bringing all emotional baggage of their life, and that sort of thing all all helps inform the way we work on things and the way we relate to things. I think that's where personal style comes in more. It's less sort of these are the sounds that I use or this is my style as a sound designer. It's more how one like talks to people and relates to directors and showrunners and helps facilitate their vision as best and as eloquently as we can.
Because again, it's interesting that as someone who's new, you're coming in and you're sort of, I guess, trying to get sort of grips of what people are doing and what they want. And especially with like an episode where a lot of crew have come back, I'm sure it's probably for them, it's like riding a bike. But then when you're someone new, it's slightly different.
I'm sure they all looked at me and thought, "Who's this guy and why is he on our series?" But but thankfully, again, I had James and Will and Gibran and as a sort of the mixing team at the farm, who James has been across two seasons as a full mixer, and then sort of even back in the day, I think he started on San Junipero as a mix assistant. So he, I lent on him in the first couple episodes to lead, not the direction creatively, but just the relationships with the crew and with Charlie. And then you sort of, as the episodes progress, relationships form, and I think it went really well. It was a really fun season for everyone to work on with just such broadly like different genres of episodes and just so many different things to get stuck into. It was a real gift to work on.
And as for like shows like this, where you're kind of jumping in sonically into two different worlds, where you have the Callister world, where basically it's like it is a video game, and then you have the real world. How do you go about creating the sounds for both and implementing sounds, and then that audiences could differentiate between the two, but then also kind of get sucked into that world as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting one with Callister because the obviously the first episode was sort of Star Trek Prestige sort of thing, and it was very heavily indebted to the first Star Trek series, and that's where it sounded brilliant, and that's where they went with the sound for it. And because this is slightly different, and it draws from sort of, I mean, quite clearly from the J.J. Abrams Star Trek world, and from sort of No Man's Sky and the video game side of things, and from Star Wars, and there are so many different influences that all sort of are part of this thing that forms like the canon of sci-fi sound design, right? And we're suddenly given this episode that says, cool, all those iconic sounds, that's your playground, do something that is indebted to them, but also feels unique. And it's a really exciting challenge. And it becomes really inspiring as you go through the episode because you start almost discovering sort of little tricks that clearly other sound designers have used in the past on those Star Treks and those Star Wars films and TV series, and then you almost discover a little bit of insight into how those are made, and then go in your own route and sort of develop the language for the episode. And it, I think it was almost easy to have a juxtaposition between that and the real world because of the nubbin and the way they sort of transported in and out, the audience was immediately placed into a very specific time and place. So I think it made the juxtaposition kind of sort of evident in the visuals, which made our job easier. And we also had Dan Pemberton's great score that really helped drive those transitions. Yeah, really fun score to work with, and just a really fun sound world to be in.
Because it's based on stuff like Star Trek and Star Wars, do you ever go back to those films and then start noticing other sounds that they use that you could maybe not like cherry pick and think like, well, maybe this could work for this scene or it could work for that scene?
It's less cherry picking the sound, but definitely taking inspiration because I think every sound designer has of especially I mean of my generation has grown up listening to like Ben Burtt's work in Star Wars, right? And listening to all these incredible films that the research for episodes and for films whenever we work on them has to be quite intensive, right? It always starts at script stage and it always often it can be reading books if the scripts are adaptations of books, or it can be, spending as much time as you can, but normally a couple of weeks of really just trying to get your head into the script and really trying to be informed emotionally by what's going on. And that process happened with this, but then we also have the kind of what this is based on. You have the original Callister episode, and you have these old Star Trek series and the old Star Wars films and games that we could also play and watch, and it became a really fun way of getting your head into the game a little bit. And yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a dream, right? The research before a spotting session is go watch the first episode and watch a bit of Star Wars and come back to me.
Yeah, and also the fact that like your research is just basically sort of reliving childhood nostalgia in a way.
That's it.
Um,
Yeah.
but then also it's still yeah, I just find it quite interesting the whole research process, even for every department, because it's to me it sounds it's quite fun because you're just kind of looking at things from the past, but then also trying to find your own style and sound, and especially like on a Black Mirror where you have stuff that's kind of set in, it's like has a contemporary feel to it. So as audience members, we're kind of used to hearing these sounds in everyday life. So I guess if something's like just slightly off, you could probably pick up on it. But then also, I guess there's like a way where you have to get a right balance of like real life to sort of TV life sound as well.
Exactly. And that's something he's got a very keen ear for sound and he loves sound and he's a fantastic showrunner to work with in that sense. But it's very much what drives the show is sort of human connection and humanity, and it's sort of filtered through the prism of technology. So whilst ostensibly, yes, it is a show about technology and the evils that some of that can lead to, it's really a show about human experience and love and loss and grief and just things that connect all of us. And I think when you tap into that side of all the stories, you are using sound to tell the emotional narrative of these episodes, and technology becomes a tool to help tell that story. And like Callister's is a prime example where the when we're on the bridge, a lot of the bleeps and bloops and a lot of the computer sounds they evolve throughout the episode, and the textures of them evolve a little bit, and the mix on them evolves, and that is all to help keep the bridge feeling alive, but also to track the emotional narrative of the scenes as well. And I think that's where sound becomes such a powerful storytelling tool. And it's always a pleasure working with directors and Toby on Callister and with Charlie, who just love sound and are acutely aware of the storytelling properties of it. And that's a real joy.
And I think as well, like when you have somebody who is so attuned to sound, because I can imagine that sometimes as showrunners or directors can probably sometimes miss it out. And I feel like maybe sometimes as well when people are in like film schools as well, it's like sometimes that's like something that people will miss out as well on because for them it's like the visuals, not the sound. But then the more I talk to sound people, the more I realize just how much sound plays a part and also how much fun they can have to mess with the audiences.
For sure. And I think we're with everyone in post, from obviously from the edit, but from visual effects to the grade, to us in sound, to like post supervisors on it as well. Like we are technicians in some respect, but we're all storytellers, and we're all doing this as a way of helping tell stories through our different skill sets. And I think that's where shows take off, and that's where shows become really fun to work on. And I think you get the best result is when that sort of appreciated and cultivated throughout the process. And yeah, schedules are tough in TV, right? Compared to your dunes and your films that you're on for, 2 to 3 years doing sound design research and development before you actually start it. We're on a compressed schedule, all the departments are, and we're on a compressed budget for something like this, but we you find ways of putting the time and putting the research in, and that comes from having sort of a top-down approach from Netflix and from Charlie and from Jessica, where they really supported all of that, and they really understood and supported the need for everyone to have time and space as much as could be afforded to really put their input into it and to help further all these stories.
And when you have something like this where you're on you mentioned about like the time compared to films where you can have a lot more freedom to with time. How do you go about creating your workflow as well? Because then if you're on such a tight schedule, and you want to make sure that you're sort of making your days, but then also not going over budget, for example, how do you go about doing something like that?
It comes down to almost like it's a willingness to be vulnerable and to be okay with sharing things that are incomplete. And I think that's the thing I've learned most over probably the past 5 years is that you have to relinquish you've got to relinquish control of your perception of like this is my art or this is my sound or this is something I've created. Everything you're doing is in service of the director in the film, and it's to the benefit of everyone to get that stuff. But obviously, when it's somewhat ready, but get that stuff in front of the people who are cutting the episode, of the editors, of the showrunners, to let us all sit with that material for as long as possible, and that you sort of develop that bit of back and forth with the cutting room by sending, I'm sure Dan would have done it in the music as well, sending rough drafts of music and us sending rough sound design passes of things. And that's where you sort of make the time back is you just have to be willing to trust your instincts and work quickly, but just share as much as possible. And you go on this journey as a post-production team and as a television team on this, and you hope that by working like that, everyone has little bits of input into everyone else's work, and I think you end up with something that is informed by lots of different perspectives, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, and I guess as well with having so many different perspectives and views, it helps with, you know, you might be missing something or some one conversation could spark an idea as well that you wouldn't have expected that day. And
Absolutely.
I do like
Like
that.
I had my
Sorry, go.
experience on this was it was like unique in the sense that I've spoken about before, but it's always in my head when talking about Black Mirror is that my partner and I had our first child when the first episode was locked. So it was a crazy journey of sort of becoming a father for the first time and learning how to look after another life, and also working on Black Mirror, which is a show I've always wanted to work on. And a lot of the stuff, a lot of the things you do in film and television really are influenced by your everyday life, right? And it's like so much of the work in this series, a lot of it was done at like 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning, not because the schedule needed us to stay up that late, but because I happened to be feeding my little boy at that time. And you would get little weird ideas for sound design bits for the spaceships or stronglets in the plaything episode. And it was it was quite a blurry like 12 months working on it. But yeah, it's a unique experience, I think.
My little one's about to be one in the next few months, so I think I know exactly what you mean when you're feeding. It was like 2 in the morning, and you just think, "Oh, I want to go back to bed," and then your mind starts racing. And I guess with like
That's it. Yeah.
a sound perspective, because you're sort of sitting there in silence. I don't know if you have a white noise machine going off, but then also the sound of your little one drinking from the bottle. Sometimes if the bottle's not screwed on properly, it makes like a weird suction sound. I don't know if you've had that.
It's all yeah, no, it's all stuff like that. Like that did inform so much where you're exhausted and then he makes this weird cooing noise that you've never heard before. And I always had a little microphone in my pocket on my iPhone and I would just record little snippets of it. And that would get processed and slowed down or sped up and put through various like outboard like gear and processes and stuff. But so much of Yeah, a lot of the sounds for a lot of things in this season has come from either not specifically sounds of my son, but just quite human things. And I always find that yeah, designing stuff for technology, it really helps to start with something that emotively feels like it's got a human connection to it.
Again, it's funny, isn't it? Just like a creative process of just listening to, feeding your son, keeping him alive, and getting the creative sort of influences flowing there. And that's another thing that I just really enjoy about like sound process is the little things that you can pick up on to think, oh, actually that could be perfect for a spaceship flying through, or this could be for when they're messing around on another planet. And especially with Callister, where they're expanding the world by going on other planets, and it's great visually, but then also sonically you can play around with a bit more and add add more into it. It's like the same when they'll go onto the what is it planet? The with the forest planet, and how much
Yep.
fun you can have there by invoking, I don't know, something like Predator, for example, and having that sort of feeling of like what could be out there at the same time because it's another unknown world.
Well, exactly. I think one of Toby's references for that initially was the Dagobah system in Star Wars. And that was, yeah, he was like, right, listen, go back, listen to that. Like, I don't want to do that, but I want a little bit of the feeling that I had when I first watched that, which is basically asking the team to invoke like his nostalgic childhood memories, which that's quite a difficult task. But listening and using it as a reference was useful. And it's worth saying that I'm obviously the supervisor on the show, but I have a fantastic team of incredibly creative people working with me on it, and they all put their all into it, and they were all sounding boards, and we just bounced ideas off each other. And that Jungle Planet's a prime example where our one of our sound designers, James Hayday, was based in New Zealand. That he went to a it was an area he's told me the name before and I've forgotten what it is, but it was sort of it's like a nature reserve that in a certain part of where he lives in New Zealand that is essentially completely free of predators. So wildlife has just developed and evolved in a really interesting way there. And you have just these incredible sounding birds and insects that he got some amazing recordings of. And those were all a lot of that Jungle Planet of those recordings have been pitched down and sort of and messed around with a little bit. But it's the importance of getting out and recording bespoke things for everything we do because we all draw from certain sound libraries that we all use, but the special I think the special source, if you like, of anyone's work is when they've gone out and used their ears to listen to the world and have captured something unique, and we try to do that as much as possible in these episodes.
Still think that's quite cool though, going out somewhere where there's no predators around for the wildlife and just how different that must feel like sonically. Because sometimes if you do go out in the woods or whatever, you probably hear birds or probably birds of prey at the same time, but you might not hear what else is around.
Yeah, that's it. And he just captured some incredible sounds. Yeah, the recordings sound freer because there's nothing around to get these birds. They sound almost happier and more expressive to a certain extent. And yeah, they were great recordings and really useful for as a other stuff was added on top, but just as a base for that Jungle Planet, they provided a really unique soundtrack.
Yeah, and I guess as well when you're sort of editing the sound, how you can sort of warp it and it's like, well, if we just maybe change it a little bit, we could maybe make it a little bit more sci-fi heavy, or maybe we could slow it down and imagine how you can make that sound if it's slowed down, how it can feel like again out of this world feeling.
Yeah, I mean another good example of that in the Callister episode is the sort of the Mars-like planet, or we find the original, or we find a Walden appeared on. and a lot of the winds in there. So we wanted to evoke sort of a Martian sort of, I mean, it's actually shot in Wales, but a sort of a Martian landscape. And a lot of that came through making sure we had a contrast and juxtaposition to the sound of the jungle planet. And jungle was focused more on sort of a swampy, insecty sort of feeling, and the other planet was more wind based, and we took a lot of vocal recordings, so recordings that we'd all done over the years, our own voices, actually recordings of one of our sound designers had recordings of his mum's choir practice back in the 70s that was, again, we processed it, but actually a lot of those sounds are in there in a somewhat of a raw state, just layered underneath natural sounds, and it gave the environment, I think, a really unique, interesting sound to it.
Still think that's quite funny though, using something from the 70s in terms of having that recording. I guess it's probably digitalized, but if it was something physical, somebody would probably be like, "You should throw that out. You're never going to use it." It's like, well, one day I will. One day I will.
There is always a sound that you'll think that's never going to end up in anything, and then you'll find the perfect time to use it. And
Just
having it's something else we did on this series as well. There's something about the physicality of recorded media, and we live in a world of ones and zeros, and that's how we mix films, that's how we watch films. But there is something about whether you're catching sound waves, moving a membrane in a microphone and recording it, or whether it's done to tape. It has a certain emotive quality, I think, that always helps. And maybe that's me imposing like nostalgia and like memories of making the recordings onto it. But a lot of sounds are used. I'm sure a lot of sounds other sound designers use. They're not always the newest. It's the sound that has the most emotional resonance a lot of the time, and the heart and the mind reacts to something that it empathizes with. It doesn't. It's not necessarily the fidelity of the sound or how pristine it is. It's how it makes you feel, and that's I think when you sort of when you learn to decouple the way your sound makes you feel from the thing that created it, it's really freeing as a sound designer and as anyone that works in film because you realize that you can use the textures and you can use the timbre and the cadence of sound, tell a story, and it's sort of irrelevant where it comes from. And when you've got an episode like Callister where you can create lots of things that don't exist, so lots of spaceships and guns and planets and transporters and teleporters, having that sort of viewpoint is really helpful because it's just incredibly freeing, and you don't feel tied down by a specific way of working. You can use all the tools in your toolbox to hopefully create something special.
and as well, like the idea of sound evoking certain feelings for people, and again, that's probably just how our minds are probably wired as well, and how special sound can be, especially in like a medium like film and TV, and how important it could be just for how audience members can feel what's happening on the screen. Yeah, it's quite fascinating. I'd be quite interested to find out more about like the science of it all, but it still would be interesting as well, just how it's how you guys layer it in and how important like those certain crescendos are used.
Yeah, and it's a relationship between sound and music as well in all these episodes. And that's where, again, Dan's score was brilliant and massive, right? And huge where it needed to be, delicate where it needed to be. It had light and shade and contrast and made you feel like you're watching this massive Hollywood epic, and then in some moments got where it needed to, got quite delicate, and that's something that we were doing with the sound as well. And I think it's that sort of relationship that I think the audience members subconsciously react to is when you're taking them on a journey, and it is not just sort of a brick wall of sound necessarily going at you. Sometimes that works, but it's about having the contrast and the juxtaposition and sort of letting letting people's ears have a break when they need to have a break, and taking them on that journey. And that hopefully is always the thing that that draws people into watching stuff. You want people sitting in their seats, sort of leaning in to find out what's going on to listening, and then you want to smash them back into the seat and hit them over the head with something afterwards. And I think we had the opportunity to do that quite a lot in Callister because all the episodes, even Hotel Reverie, there was just a lot of scope to be really delicate in some spots and to evoke really really big emotions and go huge with music and sound in others, and that's the joy of Black Mirror. Like there's just so many. Charlie gives everyone such opportunity to um to really throw everything at these episodes and put a little bit of ourselves into them.
Quite like that. I like that idea as well. It's probably a good feeling as well in terms of having a showrunner be like that and allowing to let you put a piece of yourself into the show as well. Also, kind of ironic as well, Black Mirror, and just how if you're putting a piece into yourself into it, it's just like how the characters have lost a piece of themselves as well in the show.
Yeah, that's it. There's a little, there's good and there's a tiny little bit of our souls that are stuck in season seven forever, I think.
He's playing 4D. He's not even 4D chess. It's 5D chess.
Yeah, that's
Um,
it.
with what's happening. Just you've mentioned it a number of times about Daniel's score and the use of it in it. But when it comes to sound and score, how do you create the perfect dance routine for them to complement one another? Because when I was speaking to Daniel about it, he was saying that you kind of are split in the middle, that you one set have done a lot of hard work, another set of people have done a lot of hard work, and then it's kind of maybe it's not that somebody's got to give, but it's kind of like people need to sort of collaborate a bit more to make sure that they don't overshadow one another.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think it's not a dirty secret in the industry, but it is a bit of a problem, and it's more a factor of just schedules and I guess historic reasons for it. But sound and music do not communicate anywhere near as much as they should, I think, a lot of the time. And thankfully, this episode was really different. This season was really different. We were sending sound drafts to the cutting room and to Dan, and we were hearing demos of his music, and it allowed us to communicate slightly earlier, and it just allowed us to make sure that when we were making decisions in sound and he was making decisions in music, that it was to get the best out of both departments. But by doing that, it was getting the best out of the episode and out of the story. And like everything, my entire career has been designing sounds and then muting them. Right? It's like we have to cover absolutely everything, and then you get to a mix and you end up muting half of it. And that's because you're doing what is best for the emotion of the episode and of the specific story point, and you're doing what's best to connect people to the characters. And you have to go in, and films will humble you, and you have to go in and be humble and just put just make peace with the fact that we are all doing what is best for this episode. We're servicing the picture and we're servicing the director, and it's irrelevant what does that best. And if it's music, and a lot of the time in this episode it was, and we pushed it because it was brilliant music and it connected people. But when it was sound, it was time to bring the music down a bit and push that. And it has to be this. It's got to be this waltz between the two of them, and that only happens when you have communication at an as early a stage as possible. And I always implore any any producers or post producers or anyone working in film and TV, they don't keep us separated. Introduce sound and music teams as early as possible because it will be for the benefit of everyone. It is just the best way of working. If we're all doing things in the sonic realm to create sort of the sonic identity of something, we need to be talking to each other. And I think hopefully, the proof is in the pudding with this episode, and obviously many other series and films as well who employ this sort of workflow. I think it's evident that it creates something moving and a bit special.
Yeah, and I don't think you can go wrong with obviously, as audience members, we kind of don't notice these things in terms of what probably goes behind the scenes with the um, discussions, maybe potential arguments or disagreements, and how, one could overshadow the other, which, again, in this day and age could potentially, like, I think you might notice if you're listening with your headphones on or something rather than big speakers. But still, it's interesting to hear the whole collaboration process and what you need to do to get over the line with it. We've only got a couple minutes left, so I'll have a one quick fire question for you. Should be my final question. What was your favorite scene to work on?
Oh, good question. It would have been in the moment where the net beams down to the heart of infinity towards the end of the episode before the big space battle starts and sort of first confronts Jesse Plemons's clone that's been living in the game, and there was just this beautiful combination of incredible VFX by James McLaughlin and his team, beautiful music by Dan, and a beautiful mix by James Ridgway and myself. That all sort of everything came together rhythmically and tonally, and it was just a really harmonious moment. We've got lovely rhythms of the music inform the rhythms of the transporter, which then hands off to this tonal garage opening that complements the score. And there was just a lot of effort put into it, and just a really fun moment.
Solid choice, solid choice. I think that's a really good choice. I do like that it's sort of getting sucked into another world and then trying to see what's happening and how you can build up that sort of sound and silence and how silence can be used as well.
Exactly.
Tom, thank you so much for your time today. Black Mirror streaming now on Netflix. Go out and listen to Tom's work. Thank you again.
Thanks so much, Bobby.
Thank you. You take care. Bye bye.
Cheers, man. You too. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.